I subscribed to ChatGPT Plus. It was like, oh, okay, like 3.5 kind of sucks. Everybody is always talking about 4.0. So I did that, tried it out. It's like, okay, it's slightly better, but we'll
What
see.
didn't you
We'll have to
like?
cancel it. Um, it kept failing with the things I was trying to do, which is kind of annoying. I was playing with the Lego. It was like having it create logos because I just wanted to see. And it wouldn't. Yeah, I was just having issues like converting them into
Yeah.
like vectors. Uh, Otherwise, they're kind of pointless. And then I was having to try and transcribe some audio that I had, and it was failing. It's like I do not have access to the tools required to be able to do this. But I'm like, everything I've read says you're supposed to be able to do this.
Interesting.
Couldn't do it, and so it's like it's just buggy. So I don't know if it's buggy or if it's whatever, because it was an iPhone memo format. What is it? M2A, which is supposed to be able to handle, but apparently it doesn't. So anyways, I need
Yeah.
to play with it more. I was actually interested in their the store, whatever their marketplace they have, and it was less robust than I was anticipating. There's not a lot of options. Which
Yeah.
after all that hoopla, I was like, oh, I thought it was there'd be like hundreds of things, but there isn't. So
Yeah, it
kind
does
of
feel like
disappointed.
it's like when the App Store first launched,
Mhm.
it was some key apps, but then over time, as Apple started like just capturing the market, that's when more
Mhm.
apps got
Yeah.
created. That's good to know about your transcription use case. I have something recorded that I wanted to upload as well to just summarize. So
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet, but I'll do it too and see what happens.
Yeah, see if it's maybe it's the format, but I was basically iPhone memo. I actually started using iPhone memo quite a bit to help me not have to remember or note, because I get in the habit of like I focus more on like taking the notes, right? Without really trying to understand what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Um, so I've started to try and like focus on what I'm or focus listening and then going back and kind of like reviewing like a recording of it. So I'm trying that. Maybe it's my old age. I didn't have this problem when I was younger. Yeah, so we'll see. It's got a month to convince me to continue my subscription and adding to their growth. So
I found that it's also pretty flaky and not very reliable when iterating with me on logos. I've been using it a lot to create
yes,
logos and whatnot. And
yeah,
so I think the first one that it produces it's decent. Like
hmm,
that's pretty good, but there's some tweaks that I want to make to it.
yeah, yeah,
And then when I ask it to make tweaks, it's just a horrible user experience.
yeah, yeah. Like I got some logos for us. It's like, oh, this is actually pretty cool, but there's two O's in
Yeah.
constructed, and so I was like, and it just could not do it. And then I was like, oh, why is the logo blue? Like, give it a red tint, and then
Yeah.
it regenerated a completely new logo without trying to change. Like, I just wanted to change the color palette, but it
Yep.
gave me an entire new logo.
All right, let's get into our stories this week. Thing we want to talk about first today is
As always,
earnings report, especially because we were talking about this
yes,
last week. So I'll start off and chat about two earnings reports. I'll give a little bit of a overview around Tesla earnings. We can talk about that, and then
yeah,
you will bring us into some meta earnings that were interesting, and
yeah,
we can talk about that. So yeah, last week we were talking about Tesla. We were talking about all the thoughts and things that Tesla was going through. We know that Tesla has been reducing a lot of their pricing of many things, such as their FSD cost, their uh, models, their cars. They're actually reducing the price of those. So they're trying to pull a lot of levers around costs here. They had their Q1 earnings report last week, and it was a pretty bad earnings report, to say the least. It was one of their worst earnings reports in a few years here now. But after the earnings reports, Tesla has risen around 18% since then. So that's just how the market works, right? You never know what's going to happen and how Wall Street's going to react to earnings. Huge miss, but it still went up after hours and then continued to go up for the next week. It's their first declining growth in 4 years, and they actually reported negative free cash flow for the first time in many quarters.
Right.
So that would cause most people to sell their stock since it was a bad earnings. But from what I understand, what I'm hearing, and what makes sense is, I think because of all the FUD that Tesla was getting leading up to earnings, I think everything had already been priced in. And so when Elon and team brought some of the good news during the earnings call, it actually caused the stock to pop, and Wall Street had a positive sentiment on Tesla after earnings. And so a couple of things that Elon did announce was the cyber taxi. So we covered it here where he had tweeted about robotaxi announcement on August 8th. He addressed that and acknowledged it. He's calling it the cyber taxi. And he also confirmed that they will be working on producing a cheaper car by mid 2025. So that was that from what I know is the big one that actually got Wall Street most optimistic about the future outlook of Tesla, is that he actually confirmed their lower priced car, which most analysts are predicting will be around $25,000, and they've been coining it the Model 2. And the last thing that I wanted to mention too is they did talk about full self driving. They hinted at a license agreement. I think Elon also said that he wouldn't be surprised if they got a full self-driving license agreement with some big car manufacturer by the end of the year. But because of all the push with FSD, their miles driven, their FSD miles driven quarter over quarter had increased significantly. And so why that's important is because the more miles that are driven, the more data Tesla can collect, and that data makes their full self-driving smarter in the long run. So, yeah, that's all the news from Tesla earnings. And I remember you texting me, Tony, and saying that you had got into a put lotto just because you thought it was going to go down, which I think most
Yeah.
people thought it was going to go down. So, how did you feel about the earnings and your put lotto?
The market does as the market wills. It's the most ridiculous thing. And yeah. So my comments will make sense when I guess I talk a little bit about Meta's earnings, but it was like smoke and mirrors, man.
Yeah.
I know you said Elon confirmed, but he confirmed the way that Elon does. It's like, we should. I think we possibly can. Oh, I'm pretty sure we should by this date. And so confirmed to me, it's just like
Yeah.
a stretch, and it's the weirdest thing. It's like even if it was priced in, to see it go up from what was it below one
Like
forty
138.
one like yeah like mid 140s, and it was like into the upper 160s, almost touching 170, uh, for like really just like negative things. I just don't understand. Like, was it people covering? Was it, I guess, the Tesla fanatics like piling in because Elon confirmed cyber taxi, but he's been talking about whatever cyber taxi for 4 or 5, whatever, 3, 4 years. He announced it back when again Tesla was in trouble, and people were like, "What's next? What are they going to do?" And he threw out this presentation about, "Oh yeah, how we're going to turn Teslas into the next Uber." Right? And then Uber took a hit too when he confirmed they're pursuing cyber taxi. And this lower model, like I get why a bunch of analysts like expect it, but I'm like at at that price point, let's say whatever 25,000, it doesn't make sense for an electric car because that's where the trade-off is going to have to be, right? Is reducing the battery size in order to make up for the cost. And so if like your Model 3, its average cost is like whatever, 50,000 for and most of that price of a electric vehicle is in the battery,
Yeah.
right? And so is anybody going to buy yes, it's cheap, but a car that only goes 100 miles.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Like in a very small country, like, okay, Europe, maybe it makes sense, but like here in the US, like 100 miles, that can't get you like a third of the way across Texas, as an example. Or, it just doesn't seem realistic to me what analysts are calling for. I could be wrong, but like my thoughts are like, yeah, I would never buy a car that only goes 100 miles at a time, right? So,
Yeah.
that's what I don't that I don't make yeah, it's
The number one reason people don't buy EVs today is because of range anxiety.
right.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think
Yeah.
enable for them to make it work. This
Mhm.
is where their supercharger network has to come into play. I think the more dense supercharging is within
Mhm.
the land footprint,
Yeah.
the easier, better at ease people have around range anxiety. I think this is
Yeah.
my hypothesis. So
Mhm.
that's what they need to make it work.
Yeah.
I used to have the standard range plus Model 3, which is 240 miles.
Mhm.
And so as you were talking, I was trying to think internally, could you make a standard range plus model but smaller? So 240 miles, but strip down some of the bells and whistles in the car, make it
Yeah.
smaller.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a I don't know, maybe it's a coupe.
Teslas are fairly bare bones as it is from a design perspective, right? And so I don't think they could reduce the cost from that perspective, right? As much as it would be like, let's cut the battery in half,
Yeah.
right? Um, so, anyways, but so I'm not angry per se. It's one of those things. If I were a retail investor, like on the short side, it makes no sense. Like it was a pretty negative thing. The only positives were Elon speak,
Yeah.
um, and no clear no clear on the how they get there, right? Like robotaxis is contingent on FSD hitting level 5, and to get there in 2 years, it's like I don't. I mean, that's like next year,
This is
right?
where Waymo comes into play, right? We were talking a couple weeks ago around whether or not they would adopt a lidar because as you said, robo taxis do exist already in San Francisco and Arizona,
Yeah.
but they use lidars. And a friend of mine actually posted a couple of stories last week. She was in San Francisco and was able to ride in a Waymo.
Hmm.
And I asked her what was her NPS score on it, and she said a 9. She said it
Yeah.
was pretty magical. So I don't know. Maybe this does open
Mhm.
adoption of other technologies to make it a bit
Yeah.
more precise.
Yeah. So we'll see. As with everything Tesla at this point, we will see.
What was the other thing that was positive? Uh, shoot,
He touted Tesla is an AI company. He's like, "Oh,
yeah,
if
he's
I
talking
had to
about
say,
AI.
I would say Tesla is actually an AI company." Which again, Elon speak. He says Tesla's an AI company, yet he had threatened at one point. I don't remember if his pay package, his $58 billion pay package got approved or not. But remember before that, he was saying, if it doesn't get approved, I am going to go off and create my own company to focus on AI because I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it at Tesla.
Yeah.
And so when he said Tesla's an AI company, I'm like, well, didn't you try or you're already trying to start a different AI company? And so that was kind of confusing. So it's like which way is it? Is it Tesla or are you going to create a yet another bespoke company to tackle AI? And so I thought that was confusing yet typical of kind of what Elon does. And so I think people anchored on that too,
Hmm.
right? Of, oh, AI, back to the growth story, right? Versus really introducing a cheaper model is just what any car company
Yeah.
does. Um, but the other things you talked about, the licensing of FSD, right? The cyber taxi, Tesla's an AI. So he's really trying to push on this is what the growth story so that Tesla can be valued as a growth stock,
Yeah.
right? Versus a
Well,
typical automaker.
I'm surprised people. I was surprised when they were. That was the theme, right? They were trying to position the company as more of a tech software company
Right.
versus just a car company. But what I was surprised at was why do they still need to do that? Or people still don't still people still look at Tesla as a car company
Yeah.
when the whole thesis around Tesla hasn't been a car company. Um, but people, analysts, like Wall Street bankers, whoever, they still price Tesla as a car company. And for me, I fundamentally believe that that's not true. That Tesla is more than a car company. When they have to repeatedly say that, it just means,
Hmm.
hmm, well, they're saying it, but they're not walking it.
Yeah.
And so when does that happen? And that's what's going to be the upwind or the downfall of Tesla, right? Is can they
Yeah.
actually get there?
Yeah. Yeah. But anyways,
Yeah.
so
If you look back at, I was looking back at the last 4 quarters for Tesla, and I think every earnings that actually went down,
mhm,
even if they had positive earnings.
yeah.
So it's just, yeah, to what you were saying at the very beginning, just Wall Street will do what Wall Street does, and it's hard
Yeah.
to predict or play, what earnings is going to do. So
Yeah.
just got to be careful out there. But sometimes you win, and
Yeah.
sometimes you don't.
That's right. Because I'll just jump right into it. Because on the flip side, Tales of Two Cities, right? Meta had their announcements, earnings announcement last week too. Overall, pretty. I mean, pretty good. Like
Yeah.
27% increase year over year. Their first quarter revenue was $36 billion. Um, EPS $4.71. Above the estimated $4.32. I mean, it was pretty good earnings. I mean, Meta's firing on all four cylinders. But what took everybody was because Zuckerberg said, you know what, we're probably going to end up spending a little more on the capital expenditure side by like, I mean, I looked at the numbers. It's like, what did he say? Like 15, 20 billion? No, it was like 5 billion more in capital expenses to basically help them grow their AI, support their kind of AI infrastructure. And at one point, it was down to like basically it closed from where it jumped last quarter, that huge 25% jump. It basically tapped $400
Hmm.
about before people realized, like, oh, wait a minute. This is actually it's not that bad. And it kind of gained a little bit back, but still it was down like 10%. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy. Like literally Meta and Zuckerberg outlined why they would need to spend that much is to grow AI. That's actually a positive thing, right? They're investing in that infrastructure. And he also talked about, I don't remember if this was actually in the earnings or it was like a secondary interview, but he talked about, they're considering open sourcing their Holo software, HoloLens OS, which I thought was actually pretty cool. Um, but yeah, they didn't get as much credit for any of that stuff, and people just decided, no, scary.
Sell off. Didn't he also
uh,
forecast a weaker second half?
yeah, I mean, he's softer guidance, but still, um, compared to Tesla losing money, it's not like he was like saying negative growth. It was just like a little bit softer at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Um, but overall, it was still a positive earning. I mean, come on, like, what is this? Daily actives was 3.24 billion. Um, yeah, I mean, I didn't see anything, so I
Yeah.
did dip by a little bit. Again, not financial advice. Um, I was so mad. So it was like it went down to like the lower 400. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy a few. it might go down more, once market opens, and it was up by like 20-30 bucks by then. I was like, oh
Yeah,
man, I
I
should have
missed my
just
opportunity
let it
to
go.
buy into Meta, but I wish I had.
Yeah. Um,
Uh, but I think it's also something, with these two different earnings that were opposite sides of the success spectrum, yet had
mhm,
different reactions.
mhm,
We talk about market manipulation, all that stuff. Tesla had been going down, down, down for the last couple months here,
yeah.
and so Wall Street is looking for an opportunity to get it at a low price. What that often does to retail is induces FOMO, right? And so
Yep.
people are going to buy it up. On the opposite side, Meta has been going up and up and up,
Yeah.
and so it needed to come down. I
Yeah.
think the market is selling to induce fear
Yeah.
so that the banks can get it at a lower price.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the whole psychology and
Yeah.
crap that us retail investors have to deal with.
Yeah. Um, but anyways, yeah. So I mean, I'm a little bit more optimistic about what Meta is doing, especially if you really think about where AI is going. It makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
And what was it? What else did Zuck try to do last week? Oh, Llama 3.
Hmm. All over
That
my
was
Facebook app now.
yeah, that was launched. It's like, trained on whatever like the most data used ever to train a model is Llama 3. But there was an interview with Zuck again on this, and I thought it was super interesting, kind of like the approach that they're taking around it. And so Zuck was talking about how they didn't want to be in the same position as they were with Apple in kind of how Apple controls a large portion of where their products are used, right? The App Store, basically. It's like, do we really want that with AI? And so that's why they are taking this open model approach to make AI ubiquitous across the board, so that um, you kind of have to think twice if you want to try and use like what you have of AI as like the monetization factor, right?
Hmm.
So I thought that was kind of interesting on why they're pushing Llama 3, kind of like this open source route. And so it really becomes how companies leverage that based off of like their kind of own data sets, right? Yeah, I think we've talked about that before, but like the data sets that these companies have is really what's going to make them unique in the world of AI.
Yeah.
So I thought I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think that was one of the biggest fears early on was that AI would be dominated by these large, two, three tech companies. And so it looks like Zuck and is taking Meta towards the route of we're just going to make it available to everybody because it really doesn't impact
Mhm.
Meta's business, right? If you think about it, they're not like an AWS or Azure. They don't need to monetize it from that front, right? A lot of their monetization is based on the user side. Um, but anyways, I thought it was interesting. Yeah, maybe we can talk about that in a different
Yeah,
episode.
I gave it a try because I remember opening my app and I just Instagram, Facebook,
Hmm.
Messenger, this new
Hmm.
blue circle was there. So they're pushing hard. I think what you
Yeah.
said around content, yeah, they're in a prime position with the content because they have so much
Yeah. Mhm.
content. We talked about how Sam Altman was an investor in Reddit.
Mhm.
We talked about someone from the Quora board being on OpenAI's
Yep.
board, and that's
Yep.
all for user generated content. And
Mhm.
Facebook has 20 years now of user generated content within the
Yeah.
billions of people globally. So
Yeah.
they're in a prime position to make use of these large language models to
Yep.
make useful AI.
Yep.
I tried it out when it came out, and I tried to have it do some of the things that I've been asking of ChatGPT, like to create an image,
Mhm.
all that stuff, and it was pretty good. However, I'd say the one thing that was resonating in my mind as I used it was the whole privacy thing. I think Meta still has a privacy like cloud over its head, right?
Yeah.
Where it's well, if I type it into this, what are they going to do with all what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that actually gives me, who is a pretty, tech forward person, even gives me pause to actually use it more
Yeah.
broadly for what I want to use it for.
Yeah.
But it did a pretty good job. And then Facebook primarily makes their money from ads.
Mhm.
So it's only a matter of time before ads makes its way into this Meta chatbot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he did talk about it. And I think that was the other thing that was that people anchored on was he did say it will take them time to take full advantage of AI in their products, like on the time span of like years before they get there. And I think that somehow spooked investors. But again, it's like load up the baby's stock account with Meta, right? Because by the time he's old, it'll be the sweet spot for Meta. But
Yeah,
anyways, again, laid out fairly concrete on like this is the plan, this is the kind of like strategy behind it, right? Versus Elon was more, yeah, I think we should. I think we will. Makes sense to me if we hit that timeline. It's kind of pulling it out of the air versus, it felt like Zuck had a clear idea of where he's taking the company. But privacy. So I mean, that's the interesting thing, right? It's not just Meta. And this is I was trying to look at this at when I on ChatGPT Plus also, is that all these AI companies and models will use your inputs to train
Mhm.
their models, right? I mean, that's just how they do it. And so with ChatGPT, there's all these caveats like, all right, you can delete this, but we're still going to hold your data for 30 months or 30 days before it's deleted. Um, and so I guess it's interesting, but I haven't seen anybody take. We'll see what Apple does at Worldwide Developer because I tend to think of them as a gold standard from a privacy
Yeah,
perspective to see if they found a workaround to be able to not use your data because AI to me is useless if you don't have data to train it on
totally.
because that's the point, right?
Yeah, and I was going to bring up Apple because I think Apple's in a hard situation now with this whole AI thing.
Yeah.
I saw this side by side comparison between the Rabbit that we talked about last week
Mhm.
and Apple Siri, and the person was asking the same question to both Siri and to Rabbit, which is
Mhm.
powered by Perplexity's AI.
Yep.
And actually, I think out of 6 or 7 questions, Apple performed faster and better on maybe like two, but the Rabbit performed better, not necessarily faster. It
Right.
still suffers from the same thing that the humane AI pin suffers from, which
Yep.
is having to make a call to the cloud. But the answer that it provided was much better than what Siri provided.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I think I'm really interested to see what Apple's plan here is because
Yep.
it's clear they're behind, very behind.
Yep.
And I mean, it's not going to make or break the company, but it's definitely going to put Apple in a position where they're scrambling and they're not going to
Yeah.
benefit from this AI growth.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is it's probably gonna affect their how they're priced, right?
Hmm.
I think people are itching to be able to price Apple as an AI company, but until they actually hear some concrete things of what they're going to do, maybe we'll find out. I mean, there were more rumors this week of Apple in talks with OpenAI um, now versus previously it was other companies. So
But how do you
it
think
look
that
it
would go
sounds like
down?
Apple is shopping around, huh?
How do you think
What's
that
that?
would go down though? Microsoft is owns OpenAI for the
Yeah,
most
that
part.
yeah, that was where some of the arguments were. Is like Microsoft would never allow this,
Yeah.
but I think it could be like if you think what was it? Apple pays Google like billions and billions to use Google search on Apple devices. Why not use AI from competitive or a competitor company? right? So that they don't have all their eggs in one basket
Mhm.
either. So I think so. I mean, I don't think Apple and Microsoft have as much overlap as they used to. I mean, they used to purely compete on Mac OS versus Windows, right?
That's
Where
their
I
only
think now,
competitive. That's their only competitive
yeah,
land right now.
yeah, yeah, and I feel like that's less of a thing. So what I mean by that is a lot of Microsoft apps are built natively for
Yeah.
Apple too, right? Once Satya took over, I think they kind of changed how they thought about how they cooperate with different companies. So I don't know. People were saying it. It's like I don't think so, right? Microsoft's focus is largely on Azure with AI. Um, yes, they're starting to incorporate it in Windows 10 and 11 with this. They've added this Copilot thing, which is super annoying. But yeah, I I don't think Microsoft would have an issue with it,
Yeah.
especially if they could turn that into some. Yeah, I don't think they have an issue with it.
Guess we'll just have to wait for WWDC and
Yeah, because Apple would be one of their biggest customers if you think about it
yeah.
at that point.
It's also going to be a rocky ride because we also have the election right coming up, so that's going to add volatility.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our last story. Non, earning, non Tesla, non earnings, non
Yeah.
tech, but definitely affects the technology and tech industry that we are familiar with quite significantly. Last week, there was some news that came out that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, created a rule that's actually going to ban non-competes. And non-competes affect us here in the tech world because whenever we sign a new contract, other than in San Francisco, because I think in California it's actually not a thing,
Mhm.
but whenever we sign new offer letters or contracts with tech companies, there's always non-compete clauses in it.
Mhm.
What a non-compete means is if you end your employment or if you leave the company, you typically can't join another company that's in a similar industry or similar business for at least 2 years. That's what
Mhm.
the standard non compete typically does to a lot of tech workers and science workers. And the reason for that is because, they don't want someone going to Amazon, for example, working in AWS, learning about all their secret sauce, and then going over to Microsoft and bringing all those secrets to Microsoft so that they can just replicate what Amazon's doing. So that's an example of why non-competes exist. But that's also really stifled innovation because non-competes also prevent you from working on projects on the side. Basically, anything that you work on after hours or on the side is technically still considered company property.
Yep.
And so if you were to have this great idea because you're working at Meta and you have this great idea for like a new social app, for example, if you were to build that while you're still working at Meta, um, then your non-compete would actually say that's illegal, and then technically Meta would own that. So basically, the FTC's final rule they're saying is going to generate over 8,500 new businesses a year because now people can actually go create those startups, for example. It should
Mhm.
actually raise worker wages because a big way that you actually can make more money is if you jump from company to company.
Mhm.
But if you have a non-compete, then you can't do that. So if there isn't one in place, then Google might poach someone from Microsoft, for example, and pay them 20% more what they're getting paid now. And without a non-compete, that makes it possible. One other thing they mentioned in here is that this rule will ban non-competes, but it will still exist for senior executives. Typically, that's vice president or higher, but that segment only represents about 0.75%, so under 1% of
Yeah.
workers, and so it'll have
Yeah.
a lesser impact to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that also makes more sense. In my experience, the rule of thumb is non-competes are never really going to affect you as a as a lowly individual contributor, or
Worker bee.
yeah, they're not going to affect you as a worker bee or as like a mid-level manager, because in order to pursue non-competes, companies have to spend money, right, on legal
Yep.
fees to actually prove
Yep.
that you violated the non-compete agreement. For senior executives, vice presidents and above, they're much more willing to pay those legal fees because they
Yep.
have more knowledge, more confidential information, etc., that they can use at other companies. So,
Yep.
yeah, this news was blowing up on my LinkedIn
Yeah.
feed and some other channels because a lot of
Yep.
people were excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, the top 1% or those exec levels, probably it doesn't matter either way, because usually it's also the acquiring company that if there is some legal challenge, they will, whatever, front legal on the legal side for whoever they want to hire. Um, to the worker bee perspective, right? I think it's always this lingering fear that's kind of like an overhang. It's like, can I do this? Can I do that? Right? Am I going to get sued? And I think that's really what tech companies use to prevent, um, you know, at this lower level from jumping ship. It'll sound weird for people not in tech, right? Because like if you think about normal work, your salary range is pretty fixed. Like if I went from one restaurant to another, it's typically minimum wage plus or my plus a few dollars here and there. But for tech, the way salary works is like there's usually this huge range of what you can earn, right? And so you have like this huge range of like what your base salary is, and then you have this huge range of how much stock you get from a company, and then you have this like other like what is it, frosting on top, which is like a bonus, again another range that you get. And so that's one way that a lot of people in tech get increases in salaries. When you kind of spent some time at one company, you gain that experience, and then you use that to get a better salary at a different company where you can make use of all this new experience you've used. And so these non-competes really try and fundamentally that's what it's trying to cap, right? Is one tech worker salary, and then under the guise of, oh, this work could be, you might know something and share it with the other company. And so yeah, I think it's a positive, but we'll see. And I
Yeah.
think the point on startups is very important, because yeah, if you like said, if you worked at a big tech company, um, what normally happens is like, oh, I have this idea, for instance, like some things are obvious. Like if I wanted to go start a coffee shop, right? They're not going to care. But if you were doing, a tech related to quote, another tech related software or, idea, normally if it wasn't stopped outright, you actually have to go to the company and say, "Hey, I think I'm going to be doing this on the side. Is it okay?" And you kind of have to ask permission, and they
Yeah.
can evaluate. But I mean, if you think about that kind of like hurdle, additional red tape, it's like, are most people going to do it? Because you'll probably get told no, right? Because these companies they do so much that it's very hard to find something they're not doing. Um, but yeah, it'll be cool. And as you said, it doesn't really exist. I mean, non-competes exist in California. They're just not enforceable.
Oh,
But
they're not enforceable.
yeah, they're just not enforceable for the most part. That's what I hear people say, but I'm like, all right, I still think it lingers, right? But anyways, so it'll be good. It'll be good.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you said that resonate with me the most is more that mental friction
Hmm.
as a worker bee. It's like, oh, should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? Do I need to
Yeah,
keep it a secret from my manager?
yeah, right.
And so not having that mental friction is, I agree, is going to allow people to just be a bit more free and open with what they want to do. The last time this actually came into effect was 4 years ago. There's a higher level employee that left Amazon to go work on cloud marketing at Google. And
Oh, okay.
Amazon actually went after that and tried to block this employee from working at Google.
Mhm.
So there's another one I heard around I think Cruise, the self-driving tech.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah,
someone had, I think, left a Waymo and went to Cruise,
yeah,
and they went after that person as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
So it does happen, but like we said, mostly on the higher level executive, or even just like really important person who's been working there for 20 years. In my networks, there were few people rejoicing, just being like, "Oh, now you can post that side hustle or that side startup on your LinkedIn or on your
Right.
resume and not worry about it."
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's like you had to, like, try and fly under the radar for fear of retaliation, right? Now you can be a little bit more open and hopefully because you're open, allow for more things to succeed, right?
Yeah,
Versus trying to do it covertly.
yeah.
But we'll
Was
see.
interesting news that seems small, but I think it's going to have a bubble effect once it actually goes into place.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was the stories for us this week. As we always say, please follow us, like us, subscribe, and leave comments. Leave more comments for us so that we can know how to adjust. But hope you're enjoying it so far. Any last words you want to say, Tony?
No, I think that was the important part. Please comment. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. We're always looking at how to optimize and improve. So any feedback is always helpful.